A new season brought forth by a new year. What new dangers, what new knowledges, what discoveries, and what stories will we uncover? For all of these and more can be found here at the Lair of Omnici in this, our third season. Hello friends, I am Rob, and I am here in the Lair of Omnici to once again talk about the adventures that were created in a promotion between Dungeons & Dragons and nerds, or perhaps other candies, but nerds. This is kind of a weird project. I've already covered the very first one, which had to deal with Candy Mountain. Well, here's the interesting thing. They continue to make more and more, of course, but they kind of veered a little bit away from the relentless promotion of candy. In the following two, there's only a little tangent, nothing too serious involving candy, which I think probably the nerd overlords wouldn't be as happy about, but it kind of works. These become much easier to reskin as something that you might do outside of a candy promotion. Now remember, these are nerds. This is the Easter nerd, but still. If you notice, if you look at the nerd, this does not look like a creature that should be adventuring anywhere. Couple reasons. Well, no muscular structure, only 2 legs, no arms, and those big googly eyes would just attract all kinds of things. This is, and by all accounts, they're kind of on the smaller side. So, what business do nerds have adventuring? It's a promotion. Logic kind of goes out the window, and in fact, the characters that are made as pre-generated characters are, yes, different colored nerds, but they're clearly not actually nerds. They're just reskins of other characters that were created. And proof of that lies in the second of the series, Voice in the Wilderness, because the nerd has dark vision. So far the only one that has had dark vision, but yes, the nerd can actually see in the dark, which might be kind of handy. Now, the first one, Candy Mountain, I kind of shredded a little bit because it was somewhat of a lame adventure, really. There was no great threats to the character, but on the other hand, it was a single character adventure for a rogue. So, a stand-up fight isn't what you're looking for in that situation. I can understand that. It also hit on several of the hallmarks. For a rogue, you had to open a lock at one point. I don't think there were any traps to take care of, but that's fine. You don't really need that. And there was, I believe, a lock that you could pick using your skills that way. After that, you, as you would expect in Dungeons & Dragons, you chose where you used your abilities. So as far as sneaking around, there was an option that would allow you to do that. Hiding in the shadows, sure. One big sneak attack to take out an enemy? Yeah, but that's a problem when you're a single person. You have one shot, basically, to do that, and after that, you don't have any other allies around. Your sneak attacking options get limited, so you have to make that shot count. And if it gets into a one-on-one fight after that, the rogue is at a serious disadvantage. So as a result, the adventure is somewhat weak. The only enemies really are kobolds and a kind of a goblin stand-in. So that was okay for what it was. Honestly, I've kind of softened on it a little bit. It wasn't too bad, all things considered. Especially considering what it was. Also, to give it some credit, it's designed for a younger player, and somebody who might not have a lot of experience with role-playing games in general or Dungeons & Dragons specifically. So, okay, you've got that going forward. It's a tough task making an adventure like that for some people. Sure, okay, we can go with that. That's fine. But now, we're on to the second adventure, Voices in the Wilderness. The character is Red, yeah, a red nerd, But he's a ranger, so he's got all the rangering abilities. He's got a bow, he's got swords, dagger. He's well equipped. As a matter of fact, the character is quite strong without being exceptional. High stats are 14s, but he's got 3 stats that are +2, so that's pretty good, all things considered. Some might grumble about not having a higher dexterity, maybe sacrificing something. I'm okay with it. I think the character is pretty decent all around. So, what does the character do? Unlike the rogue's character, where you just kind of wake up and stuff is happening, and you're the first person to react to this, the second one, you're red, you're actually shown to be fairly competent because you're going out and looking for the source of the problem. You're going out to nature to find your answers, which makes sense. Then a little bird tells you that, yeah, you should go and, do this thing for this NPC, who was previously mentioned in the first episode. If you do the thing for the NPC, well, obviously that's the adventures start this. You meet up with an NPC, and in this case, I like the direction they went with this. Keeping everything in nature and theme to the ranger, actually quite sweet. I don't think this adventure really needs any reskinning at all. You are going off to meet, and this is a little cute, but the character you're going to meet is an awakened shrub. Now, druids get a spell called Awaken that can basically grant life, sentience, and mobility to plants and, beasts, so that you can make a plant or a tree, something, come to life, be able to talk, and be able to move around. That's actually kind of the first time I've ever heard of a character like that being an NPC of any substantiveness in a module, and I'll give them credit. And the character is a Shrub Scout or Sprout Scout. They're basically like a Girl Scout, but it's a shrub. I still think that's kind of cute. The enemies are all nature-oriented. They're Twig Blights. Twig Blights are kind of nasty little creatures, especially if you're first level. They're a challenge rating of, I think, an 8th. So normally they really wouldn't stack up to a party, but against a solo ranger, it could be a tough encounter, and you fight pairs of them. Now, the problem, of course, being by yourself is that you have relatively little to fall back on. But I think a kind game master, if you have any healing potions or anything that can give you any kind of a boost, you could have Elwyn, the awakened shrub, come over and slip you a healing potion to get you back in the fight. That makes sense to me, and that makes this a bit more survivable. All you need is a little bad luck, and you can get knocked down fairly quickly at first level. That's always a danger. Which is why, and again, I'm going to give the folks who wrote this credit. In the beginning, they give a sample of how to deal with your character falling in combat. What to do if all the characters fall in combat. You don't want to have a bad ending of it, especially if you've got a younger player, somebody with less experience. So they have outs. They have different ways. Like they wake up and there's the NPC standing over them saying, I got you up. Chased away the bad guy. He ran when he thought that he was outnumbered and took off. So I was able to get you up with this healing potion I've been saving. Something like that. And you know what? To tell a story, I'm perfectly fine with that. As long as it doesn't happen again and again and again and gets trite, you don't want the players to feel that they have no fail state. At least I don't like that particular feeling that I'm being handheld through an adventure. So maybe, just maybe, once or twice is okay. Especially, again, younger players. I like the idea of using Twig Blights, which are underused. They're usually just nuisance encounters, but again, on a solo adventure, that's actually kind of nasty. So anyhow, they have one thing that I will knock this for, though. At one point, they have a visual puzzle of sorts. And here's the thing that I kind of have a problem with. You have this opportunity to put out something basic that a game master can grip and hold on to. A handout, perhaps. I mean, yeah, a lot of people will keep this in a digital format. But if you just took, I don't care if you took MS Paint, or you took the person who just in the group seemed to be able to draw the best, and you did something with that, I'd have been okay with that. But what do they have in the adventure? Emojis as your clues. That annoyed me. I really did. Number one, I think emojis are trademarked. Not, I don't think anybody's going to sue them, but no, I wasn't really impressed with that aspect. However, finding visual representations of things to put into the adventure and give that to your players, there's a freebie for me. You'll want to do that. It does make things a lot nicer and ties the riddle in the story up in a nice little bow for the characters. And considering the player and the NPC in this adventure, the player character and the NPC are the ones who have the skills to be able to solve that puzzle. It's actually well thought out. I like the puzzle itself. Bear in mind, the fail state is you run up against it, you don't get the clues, and you're just like, I don't know. Eventually, after sweating it out, you pretty much have to let the players get it. Otherwise, I would generally, when I have a bottleneck situation like that, always have multiple ways of getting around that bottleneck. It's just not fun standing there and waiting for you to guess what I'm thinking of as the solution. Even if it's something like a riddle with a correct answer and a fail answer. If you fail, then maybe some good things that could have come out don't happen, but you still move forward. That's an important thing, is moving forward. And that's kind of where this falls down a little bit. However, I do like this adventure more than some of the other ones I've seen. I'm going to get on with that. Twig Blights are cool. I like them as enemies. They do make one suggestion, though. And that is, they have a couple of situations that would make great adventure points. For example, they mention that there's a rope bridge the characters have to cross. And they say, wouldn't it be awesome if... They leave a lot up to the game master. Now, this is probably not a problem if you've got any experience game mastering, but if this is your first entry, and I think for something like this, you should assume that it might be, for example, a parent whose child really wants to play. This may be that parent's first time game mastering for their child. You might want to have a little bit more in there that's meant for a person who's never done this before if you're writing it at an introductory level. You say, well, maybe you could have this happen. Maybe this is exciting. Maybe this could happen because, yeah, we've all seen, say, Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom, and we know what a narrow bridge can be like, spanning a huge, deadly gap. Sure. But then they give no explanations on how you can make that work in your story. Just a few, well, what if this would happen? And one of the suggestions they have is like, oh, maybe you could add a dash of tension by having some needle blights attack. Now, needle blights are like twig blights. They're animated sticks. But needle blights have thorns they can shoot. This is a problem. Why is this a problem? Well, after all, your ranger has bow and arrow, right? Twig blights are nastier than needle blight, or needle blights are nastier than twig blights, and their basic shot can one-shot red. Pow, one-shot red is down. That's not exactly the thing you might want to suggest when they're on an open rope bridge. It becomes incredibly unlikely that character will survive if they get one-shotted by a needle blight that is ambushing them from halfway across the bridge. It's just not a choice I would have suggested, to be honest. But again, if you're the game master, sometimes you will make decisions like that. And sure, if the players know how much damage those needles can do, maybe that adds a little extra tension, but I wouldn't suggest needle blights in that situation. Maybe have them be chased by small horde creatures. Now that might be interesting. And heck, you could have really had some fun with the candy aspect by having them chased across by, you know, some sort of candy, like ants that love candy and are chasing after Red because he has candy on him or something. I don't know. I don't know if nerds are even supposed to be animate candy. I'm pretty sure they're not. But you could have had something like that and recommended. Relatively minor point. Rope bridges are just cool on their own. Enough to get a little bit of extra tension in any circumstance, so I'm okay. I'm really not all that upset. So then, again, I like this, but I like it more for an experienced player. This is not something I would throw a child into who's never played before, or even an adult who's never played before, because the opportunity for brain lock is pretty serious. Because if you pass the puzzle, there's really no dungeon to explore, which, for a short little adventure, you don't need a dungeon necessarily. You just have a scene in the end, basically. The dungeon aspect itself, there's no exploration. It's just, you're there. They do have rolls that you make to get through the wilderness, but it's one roll and you're there. I think they could have had a couple of more encounters to break things up to get to that point. You know, anytime you take a trip through the wilderness where there are monsters and creatures around, you have opportunities, but that's fine, you're saving space, I understand. You got 2 pages for the character sheet, 1 for the map, 1 for the opening splash page, 1 for the boilerplate that you put in front of all the adventures, and then you only have a few pages left for the actual adventure. Fine, you have to save space, I understand. The final encounter is rough. Not because it's impossible, not because it doesn't promote good roleplay. They actually give a couple suggestions on things you can do to make the finale end happily, where you get the gem you're looking for and nobody dies. That's great. But you really are relying on your players figuring this out. I would have had a couple more outs in the encounter so that people think their way through without necessarily taking the path that seems most obvious to the writers. The more diverse the selection of different choices are, or maybe a couple of clues here or there, I would have definitely thought about putting something like that in. The enemy at the end is pretty much a one-hit kill on either the Shrub Girl or the player character, so you have to be very careful. I think they did a good job of setting up the encounter itself to show the gravity of the situation. But it's pretty brutal if the player doesn't think their way through it. And you directly fighting your way through it would be pretty rough. So yeah, there's good elements to it. And I think an experienced player could have some fun with it. You could finish the entire adventure with just a couple of dice rolls and one good idea, however, taking a total of maybe 10 minutes. Depends on how long you luxuriate in the roleplay with the shrub. There's not a lot of other role-playing encounters unless you're talking about the outro where they meet the NPC. There's next to no loot in this one. Equipment really doesn't matter in this adventure, but you don't really have to even reskin it terribly. Now, here's one thing I would like to recommend, though, for reskinning. This doesn't necessarily have to go into this adventure series. If you're going to pull this out, there's a lot of opportunities for throwing in quick-hitting adventures that a player can handle in a little bit of time. For instance, if a ranger is looking for a particular animal companion that is somewhat rare, somewhat hard to find, a little encounter like this allows you to put your ranger into a situation going off by themselves that's not going to take a great deal of time, but allows them to feel like they've achieved something when they get what they're looking for. Another opportunity would be, for instance, a treasure map. This actually would be a great treasure map opportunity. If one of the players is absolutely dying for, say, their first magical weapon, they need a magical weapon, they've heard of them, they want one so badly, and as a game master, you don't just want to give it to them. Maybe you don't even want them to buy it. Maybe they buy a map to go and earn it in this situation. Hey, this could be actually a nice adventure by itself in that case. I can tell you of somebody who knows where there is a magical sword. Person's a little unconventional, but here you go. You meet up with Elwyn, the awakened shrub, and they take you to where you can get the sword instead of the gem that you're actually searching for in the adventure. So reskinning it would be fairly straightforward. If you don't like the idea of the Twig Blights, you could replace them with other low-level creatures. You just have to make sure. I think generally melee creatures work best because it encourages the players to think a little more tactically, eliminate numbers by hitting them from a distance while they're trying to move forward a claw. That makes that encounter a little bit more challenging and interesting, especially for a new person. If you move forward with your sword right away to engage them, those two creatures can shred you. So you've got to be very careful. Whereas shooting them from a distance and laughing about it later is probably the smartest way to go about it. Again, veteran player, veteran game master. That's just the obvious thing to me in that circumstance. But how you set up that encounter as the game master is kind of important. There's no physical map or setup or anything for you. So again, consider your player, consider your audience, and that should help you to set up this kind of an encounter. Start with the Twig Blights crashing in from, say, 40 feet away, say more than one movement distance away, would give the ranger time to pull out the bow, shoot at one, weaken or kill one of the opponents before having to settle things as they move up to hand. Or maybe they go and they scale a tree or something to try to get in a few extra rounds of shooting. Things like that allow your player to feel like they're doing something and making credible choices that impact the conflict without shoehorning obvious answers on them, or just having it be very linear, only one solution and you're done. All told, the Ranger's pretty well put together. I think the encounter is pretty decent for the story they tell with it. It gives you a lot of room to open it up to your players wanting to explore other areas. There's even the one candy-related element at all is there's a lemon drop tree. And if you eat the fruit of it, it gives you a minor magical power, which is nice. It's not bad at all. The only magical item is a reward at the very end, so magic items don't really figure into this. And the Ranger, of course, is only first level, so it does not have any spells. There's no spell casting in this, which is fine with me. I think it's pretty decent, and this is something I don't mind having and keeping in the back in case I want to do something solo really quick. And scaling this up to make it more challenging for higher level characters wouldn't be terribly difficult as long as you remember the challenges of solo play. Nobody to fall back on, meaning if things go bad, they can go bad very quickly. So, just something to keep in mind. But yeah, that is Voices in the Wilderness. Not bad. Not bad. And I think it's really got some potential for solo play if you're ever going to have a need to pull out an adventure really quickly. Don't love it for the map. Map is kind of eh. The NPC is not a bad one to pull out and use for your own. Just, I wouldn't leave him as a nerd, but yeah, maybe nerds exist in your world, and okay, so be it. But, yeah, all in all, it gets a passing grade for me. Not bad. It does what it needs to do. So, yeah. So far, they're not bad little solo adventures. Certainly something to show somebody who's interested in games who've never played before a little something fun to do. It's your question or not whether or not you want to keep it as part of the Nerds promotion. Reskinning it would be relatively easy to do. So, thanks for joining me. I'm Rob, and we'll be going into number 3 next, which is a sticky situation. So, I'll see you for that one. Thank you, and farewell.